We just got a box. We just got a box. We just got a box. I wonder who it's from. I know this is obviously Gfuel. I was genuinely curious about this Gfuel. I've been hearing so much about it. So I had to try it out for myself. So let me just take my glorified box cutter. See what's inside. Can anybody guess what flavor I ordered? Can you guess? Watermelon. I honestly can't wait to try this because I'm always looking for different sources of caffeine that are not coffee. And the bubble wrapped Gfuel Slurpee Derpy drink cup. Very nice. Oh, and I'm forgetting this Gfuel sticker with the Pewdiepie pattern. I'm gonna stick this on my computer tower. There you are. Look at her. Hey. Okay, so I at least got it open. Now I can try some Gfuel. You don't want this. Alright, let's try this. Jesus Christ, that is sweet. Super watermelon-y. I like that. I like watermelon. So Kevin, why are you doing all this? Why are we watching you drink Gfuel? Well, it's because we're gonna be modeling Gfuel. That's right. We gotta start simple. We're gonna be modeling this container. We're going to be UV unwrapping it to make it look like actual Gfuel. I'll explain that later. But we're going to do a lot of stuff. It's going to be a heavily involved project, but we're going to take it one step at a time. And if I know my audience well enough, you guys are going to want to know how to render some good-looking Gfuel. You can impress Senpai Pewdiepie with Gfuel. I know it was the one thing that was truly missing for my animation.
Where's the Gfuel?
Where is the Gfuel?
Where's the Gfuel?
Where is the Gfuel?
Where's the Gfuel?
Where is it?
Where's the Gfuel?
Where is the Gfuel? We're gonna model it right now. So we're gonna get right to the point here. We're just going to take our cube, hit M and move it to another layer. We're not going to be using it right now. If you followed the first episode, remember I said go to user preferences, make sure that you are in fact selecting with the left mouse button. You don't have to do that every time, I just want to make sure that you are, and go to cycles render, of course. I'm just gonna start display so that you can see all the buttons that I'm hitting in the bottom left hand corner. So let me get rid of that. Shift A. We're going to add a cylinder, and right away I think it's the perfect size. I'm going to tab into edit mode. I'm going to select this face, hit X, delete that top face, hit X, delete that bottom face. We're going to alt click on this ring of edges here. Alright, then we are going to hit E and then S and scale that in, like very, very close, not quite all the way, but like about there. And hit E and then S again, bring it in, G, Z, bring it down, E, S, scale it in, and then G, Z, bring it up. And then close it off by pressing F, and we have a face. So right now we got a nice lid nipple. Now that's all good. Now let's work on the bottom. Tab in edit mode, alt click on this edge, extrude it in, scale it into I guess about there, and then GZ, bring it up a bit, ES, scale it in, and close it off with a face. I don't really care about being too accurate about the bottom. No one's really going to see it. I'm gonna make a loop cut, Control R around here, and right click to confirm it in the center. GZ, bring that down so we have kind of a rounded bottom forming. That's nice. Scale that in a bit, maybe. Maybe make another loop cut here. GZ, bring it down, make it a little flat. Flatten it out just a little bit. What I often do is I go to, I toggle N on the keyboard and go to the properties, display, find display, bring that down, and then I go to toggle quad view. So now we have all these very useful views here. We got our front view, we have our perspective view, and the side and the top views. So if we're in the front here and we hit Z, we can kind of see that it's not exactly flat. We want to kind of bring this line to meet with this line and flatten it out. GZ, bring that line down till they're about overlapping. Cool. So now it should be a flat bottom surface. I could toggle quad view again, hit Z so we see what we're doing. That's cool. Alright, so now we have to make more geometry on this shape. Let me first introduce you to the subdivision surface modifier. It sounds complicated, it's really not. We're just gonna go to this little tool wrench thing in the properties panel on the right. Click that. Modifiers are very cool things, by the way. We'll go more in depth into them later, but right now I just want you to add modifier and go down to subdivision surface. Alright, now we see that that's rounded out our can. It's gonna kind of smooth it out, but it's telling us that we need more geometry because it no longer looks like a nice round can like we want. So we're gonna add more loop cuts here. We're gonna Control R, and we're going to now add more loop cuts with the middle mouse scroller button. So if we scroll, if we just use our scroller, we can control the amount of cuts that we are making in our object. I think I only want about 6, and you can see the number of cuts that you have in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. So I'm going to click to confirm those cuts, then right-click, and now we have more of a nice straighter-looking can. And we can smooth out these this geometry, these faces, by going over to the left here, under Shading, and hit Smooth. Now we still have to work on these edges here. So we want to make these nice sharp edges where the lid starts, the lid begins. So we're gonna tab into edit mode, Control R to make a loop cut in between these two loops that we've made toward the top, and we are going to left click and slide it up very close to our top edge. Not quite overlapping, but it's pretty close. If we're not happy where we put our edge, where we clicked it, we can double tap G, and that allows us to slide our edge, edit where the edge is on our object. So that's a very handy tool. Click to confirm where you want it, and now we've made a nice sharper edge. And we can make another bunch of loop cuts on the top here. Scroll it, maybe make 3 cuts here. Very nice. It's really starting to come along. Alright, maybe make another loop cut here and slide it out to meet with those other edges there. Okay, click, good. We have a nice sharp edge. As a rule of thumb for hard surface modeling, and any modeling really, the closer the edges are to each other, the sharper the line is going to look on your hard surface object. So we have a nice sharp looking edge here. So that's really cool. Now let's work on the bottom. Gonna want to make a loop cut here towards the bottom. Maybe make a loop cut under here, bring that up. I'm just going to take this edge, this bottom edge loop, and kind of scale it in just a tad. And maybe make another loop cut right here and scale that out just a tad, because the can has kind of like an indentation going on. Double tap G, bring up this loop, double tap G, bring up this loop, double tap G, bring up that loop, scale it in again. You can kind of adjust where you want it to be. If it doesn't look right to you, then you can just keep alt clicking the edge loops and just double tapping G to slide them to where you want them to be. On the Gfuel can, there's a bit of an indentation here, so let's just try to copy that. So on either side of the Gfuel container, we're going to select, maybe, let's select this vertice right here in the middle, and then go to the other side and do the same to this vertice right here. So on either side of the can, we have a vertice selected in the same place on each side. So hit G, Z, maybe we should select these vertices as well. So we have a whole edge selected there. G, Z, bring it up. And we kind of got that indentation going on. Maybe not quite so much. G, Z, bring it back down again. That looks okay. Let's just go ahead and bring this platform down. I'm gonna turn off this view subdivision surface, view 1 to 0, so now we're kind of back to the geometry that we were working with before. Hit C, and that's going to bring up your cursor where you can select by holding down the left clicker. We're going to select all these faces within our cursor's circle. Alright, beautiful. And then right click to get rid of that cursor. Then hit G and Z and bring that platform down a bit, because it's not quite so indented. And we could sharpen this up. Control R, making an edge loop, sliding it out. Control R, sliding it in. Okay, so we might want to make one more edge loop here. Control R, click, and then slide that in. Click, maybe GG, slide that in even more. Alright, we've sharpened that up a bit. Okay, so I think we're officially done with modeling our Gfuel can. Now, we have to unwrap our Gfuel can so that we can put a label on it. Okay, so let me tell you that I've been going over this a few times now, trying to find the best way to UV unwrap this. UV unwrapping takes some practice. You have to figure out where to place the seams in order to unwrap it. Like, for example, this Gfuel has a seam right here where the label wraps around and it meets right here. So that's called a seam. So we have to figure out how exactly to place our seams on the can in a way that the label's going to look good. So let's begin placing our seams, and we do that by tabbing into edit mode, and we're going to, well, first I'm going to hide this tool. I hate this tool. Let's go ahead and alt click this ring at the edge here, and then we are going to, with that edge selected there, Control E. That's going to bring up our edges menu where we are going to mark seam. Now if you hit A to deselect that, you see that the can now has a red line around where we placed that seam. So that's one seam. That's great. Now with our indentations here, we're going to find where the middle is. We can toggle quad view down here. Our notches are here, so then in the front view they would be on the side here. So now we're going to find our middle edge, and this is going to be where the label is going to meet. So we're going to shift click these edges down here, shift click, shift click, shift click, shift click, shift click, and maybe that's where we want our label to end. Maybe about shift click that little edge right there, and then hit Control E, mark seam. Okay, so now where the seam ends, we're going to alt click this edge, then we're going to make another seam. So with that edge selected, we're going to Control E, mark seam. Okay, toggle quad view, Control R, make one more edge loop right there, and then that can be another seam. Control E, mark seam. This is where the label is going to end. Okay, so let's have that meet up with the other seams here. So select this edge to meet with these other seams. Select those two edges, Control E, mark seam. Okay. Now before we unwrap it, we want to reset the scale, or else Blender's going to unwrap it in a really weird, wonky way. So the way we reset the scale of our object and make sure everything's set to 1, we are going to Control A and apply scale. Okay, now we're ready to unwrap our object. Okay, so tab into edit mode again, double click A, select everything. Okay, now we're going to hit U, unwrap. Alright, now nothing's really happened, so we're going to drag this to make a new window. Bottom left hand corner, click and drag. Alright, now we've brought up 2 3D viewport windows. We're going to change this one to UV image editor. Did not unwrap the way I wanted it to. Let's change it to conformal. No, okay. Let's see, if we remove this seam right, let's see if we remove this seam right here, if it works. We're going to alt click that seam that we had, Control E, clear seam. Maybe make a seam under it. Alt click that edge, Control, mark seam. Now let's see if we can UV unwrap this. Okay, double click A, U, unwrap. Okay, alright. Okay, so as you can see, it unwrapped the can quite nicely now that we fixed it. So you can only really see it when you double click A and select everything, and you can see it right here. This is our UV map, and we're going to be putting our label right here and adjusting it on the can so Blender knows where to put the label and where we can see it. So before we do anything, I want you to apply 2 materials to this can. Okay, one's going to be for our lids and one is going to be for our label. So firstly, go to materials, hit the plus sign, new, diffuse. Okay, so now the whole thing, if we hit rendered, it's going to be white. We can change it to black. Okay, let's go back to solid mode, tab into edit mode. What we're going to do now is hit C and select these top, go into face select, select these top faces. I'm just holding the left mouse button down and kind of dragging it over, and make sure the top here is selected as well. You can kind of miss these if you're not careful enough, so just make sure the whole top is selected here. Say this is going to be the white part of the lid, and then this as well. So we're going to hit C, hold our left mouse button, drag around till we have everything selected, right click, hit C again, drag around. We can also shift alt click, shift alt click, shift alt click. There's many different ways of selecting faces, just as long as you hit shift and you're selecting all of them at once. Shift alt click. Alright, now what we're going to do is create a new material. I just hit that plus sign, hit new material, diffuse, and then hit assign. So now if we go to rendered, the top is white, bottom is white, that's good, and the label is going to be the black part. So now let's go to our material here. We are going to go to the node editor now. We are going to go down to our timeline here, drag it up and turn it into a node editor by going to the bottom left and selecting our node editor window. And all this is mirroring our materials here on the right. So we can control our materials, as I said in the first video, in more depth in the material node editor. Okay? So, Shift A to make something new in the node editor. Make sure your cursor is hovering in the node editor and nowhere else, or else this isn't going to work. Texture, image texture. That's going to be our label. Gonna plug that in. Click and drag the color noodle to this color, and now it turns pink because there's nothing in it yet. So we're gonna open, and I have posted the label in Discord, so make sure you download that label, join the Discord, link in the description, download that label, and open it, find it, open it, and now you can see the label is really is on our can, but it's not on our can in the way that we want it to be. So now what we have to do is control it in the UV image editor. Go to material, see if this updates real time. Alright, select everything so you can see it in the UV image editor. We're going to hit L to select this island, hide it, we don't care about it. Hit L to select this island, hide it, we don't care about it. Hit L, but we're just going to move this one over by hitting G, move it over. Alright, this is going to be the top part of the label, so we're going to keep this. We still want to work with this. So now we have to open our image from down here up here. So it's already in Blender, so we can just hit this little picture thing. And now it's right there. So now we've opened it. Now we have to adjust it in our UV image editor, and we do that by hitting L, hovering over the piece that we want this as our label. So we're going to hit G, move it up, and adjust it like so, and you can see it kind of updating in real time in the materials mode. So we can see that it's upside down here, so what we want to do is rotate it, hit R, and then type in 180. Okay, so now we flipped it, left click, we flipped it 180 degrees, so now it's right side up. G, adjust it, scale it in by the x-axis. Alright. Scale it by the y, make it taller. Adjust it to your liking. If it looks right to you, perfect. If it doesn't, keep working on it. It's just a lot of tweaking you gotta do. But you'll get it. Same controls in the UV image editor, you just gotta hit G and move it around, scale it. And this top edge is white here because, as you can see, the top edge is not actually in the label area, so we have to fix that. We can scale this down by the y-axis again, bring that together so it's all fitting nicely. Okay. Now, we have to kind of match this up somehow. This unwrapped as a circle, that's a pain in the ass. Ooh, okay. We can kind of fake it. G, and then bring it kind of in the label area. It doesn't have to perfectly match up with anything, just generally kind of fake that. Make sure some parts of the label are not getting into it. We're just kind of getting that nice red and black stripe thing. We could scale it out, scale it in a little bit. Make sure no part of the label is actually showing on it. It's just that nice stripe look. I think that's cool. Moving right along. Now if we hit render, we can see that we have a nice can of Gfuel. Okay, so that's all nice. I think we're pretty happy with our label. We've adjusted our image to where we want it to be in our UV map. So I think we're ready to set up a scene. Okay, so I have my scene set up here. What I didn't go over though is how to make the label nice and shiny and kind of add a little more realism to our Gfuel, so let me just go over that right now before we do our final renders. So let me just make sure we have Gfuel selected here. If we go to rendered, again, bring up our node editor, and if we were to delete the diffuse node, now we have black, we shift A, select shader, and then go to principled BSDF, right, okay, left click, place that, color to base color, BSDF to material output surface. Okay, now we're kind of getting a little bit of a glossy look, and we can play around with all of these controls to make it shinier to our liking. So we can bring down the roughness, make it even shinier. The lower the roughness, it seems the shinier things seem to get. So it's all your own preference. So I think I'm okay with that. Whatever. For the sake of this tutorial and timing, I think I'm fine with that. So let's adjust our camera. Maybe we want to animate our camera. So let's, our camera's right here. So with our 3D cursor in the center of the grid by, hitting Shift S, make sure your cursor is in the center, which mine is, so we can bring the selection to the cursor. Now our camera is in the center of the cursor. So the Gfuel is facing along the y-axis, so let's bring the camera back along the y-axis. Say we want to have it kind of tracking in to our Gfuel. So we'll bring the camera out a bit, and we're going to bring our node editor down so we can better see what we're doing. Maybe bring our UV image editor back, and our camera's kind of pointed downward. We don't want that. We want it to be nice and flat and facing our Gfuel. And we do that by adjusting the rotation over here. Just put X0, Y0, Z0. Okay, now it's facing down. So what we would want to do is the arrow's pointing up, so that's like the top of the camera, right? So we want that to be facing our Gfuel. So how are we going to do that? We would have to rotate it along the X. First make it upright. 90 degrees along the X. Alright, so now it's upright. And then we have to rotate it along the Z, flip it 180. Okay, so now it is facing our Gfuel. Okay, so now we can kind of take a look at our camera by hitting 0. And now we're in our camera's view. So if we go to rendered, we can see our Gfuel nice in that view. We could hit, if we have the camera selected, we can hit G and Z, lower our camera a bit. We can maybe rotate it up along the x-axis just a little bit, make it like it's looking up at our Gfuel. Lower it on the z-axis just a little bit more, not so that the floor, we're losing the floor, but we want the floor to be in the view as well. Okay, so now we have a nice centered shot of our Gfuel. Very cool. Okay, now we have to animate our camera tracking into our Gfuel. So we have to open our dope sheet. Alright, this is where the animation is going to take place. So if we drag this out, let me just make this UV image editor now our dope sheet. Okay, now there's nothing here yet, but we have our camera selected. In our 3D viewport, we are going to hit I. We are going to hit location and rotation. So now we are inserting a keyframe for our camera. So now it's going to start here. Now, if we go to our dope sheet, we have created a keyframe for our camera. So that's going to be the beginning point where our camera is going to be. So if we want to slowly track it into our Gfuel, we're going to set the frame that the animation is going to stop. The camera is going to stop tracking into the Gfuel. So we have to set that frame to maybe 200. So we'll right click until, if we hold the right mouse button, we can drag our scrubber along the frames and kind of make it about 200. So now we have to adjust where we want our camera to actually wind up. So we would track in on the y-axis because our camera is along the y-axis. So we would hit GY, and now we are moving our camera into our Gfuel. Okay, so we're happy with that. I don't really like that framing, so I'm gonna hit I, location and rotation. So now, if we hit Alt-A, we can play our animation in rendered. It's gonna be a little slow and fuzzy, but we can kind of get the idea. If we go into material, it'll play even more effectively, and we can get a feel for what our motion of the camera is going to look like in our final render. So that's good, but the framing is still off. I want the camera to kind of track in and look up at the Gfuel. So okay, we're going to hit Alt-A to stop this animation. Go back to frame 200 where our keyframe is. Hit R and then X so that we are kind of looking up at our Gfuel. Or maybe we can also, while we're here hovering over that keyframe, GY, bring it out a bit, kind of adjust the framing to where we want it to be, so it's nice shot. RX, rotate it down just a little bit. Alright, now we can hit I to lock that keyframe into place. So now we've just edited our keyframe, so now it should be look a little bit different. Alt-A, play it. So now the Gfuel winds up in the full shot. Ladies and gentlemen, this will conclude part 1 of our Gfuel project. Make sure you return for part 2, where we are going to be exporting our animation and then converting our animation render to a playable video file so that we can put it on Reddit and get those upvotes. But you did a lot today. You modeled Gfuel, you UV unwrapped Gfuel, and you animated the camera to make it look like a very sexy Gfuel ad. Like, I would want to buy that Gfuel, absolutely. So, get up, stretch your legs out, eat a snack, take a nap, but make sure you come back for part 2. I will see you there.